Welcome to the Fruition Podcast. Thank you for coming on with me today.
I'm so excited to chat with you, and it's such an honor to be here. So thanks for having me.
Do you introduce yourself as I'm DJ Megan Taylor when you start a show?
Yeah.
Is it a persona for you? Like, do you feel like you embody a different side of yourself when you are DJ Megan Taylor?
I think that's a great question, but I think it's kind of like authentically like who I am. When I started DJing, which was like over 15 years ago, there wasn't very many examples of women DJs in the field. And in my opinion, they were very either like, they had to be very masculine or they had to be very sexy. And they were like, it was a lot about the body, and not in every case, this is generalizing, but it really like, there was no just like wholesome DJs that were approachable. And like, I think that I was like, yo, I'm just going to be myself and do this. And that really worked for me because I could just have great energy and be upbeat, but I didn't have to be anything extra than I am. And so I think that that's really how I got known. And so that decision it did make me different at that time, just to be very like my full self, because everyone had like a shtick, if that makes sense, when they were DJing, especially women. I remember I got invited to do the Playboy Mansion and I had to take off my top, and I was like, no. Like, I remember like, it's more of like the opportunities that came that pulled me out of who I was, that had more boundaries around.
That is so interesting. I want to come back to that whole masculine, feminine conversation when it comes to this industry, for sure. But I'm curious, what song are you looping right now?
I would say Adore You by Fred Again is like my jam right now. It's so good.
So good. So good. Let's take a step back first. Let's get to know you a little bit. So you have a brother. Did you grow up in Illinois?
Yeah, I'm from a very small town, a small town of like 8,000 people, 2 hours outside of Chicago. So there's not much happening there. It's called Princeton, Illinois. It's super cute, interesting place to grow up. It's actually not far from my parents still there. My family lives there. So that's where I spent most of my childhood, majority of my childhood. And then I moved to Chicago to go to school at DePaul when I was 18.
Okay, got it. And what was that community like? Was there a certain career path that you thought you might follow just based on what you saw?
I mean, I would definitely say that I'm a bit of a unicorn that popped out of that town. Like no one's really followed, like I have a very untraditional path. I think one influence was my dad used to work for Sony Records, but he didn't work on the music side. He worked on like the distribution side. So he basically like managed CDs and VHSs and merchandise getting to stores, like to Walmart and Target. So like the benefit was that I was like a kid with a bunch of CDs in my basement. So I
so fun.
did have a bit of a pulse on music because of that. But I would say, my inkling was to go to college for sure. And most of my friends went to college, but a lot of people went to a community college. Some people didn't go to a college. I mean, there was always a desire and expectation to do that. But I was a little bit limited by my family too, of just wanting to look in the Midwest and close. And so it's hard to regret that because everything worked out coming into Chicago, but like, I would have been really interested to go to a different, to go to like the West Coast or something like that too.
Oh, really? I thought you were going to say New York. So like, would you want to go to LA then?
Yeah, I would go to California.
Okay.
Yeah. But I had no idea. I thought I wanted to be an architect when I was 18.
Interesting.
So I ended up being like a double major of math and art, which really makes sense in this whole world of DJing. But I don't know. I just had no idea what I wanted to do. I sort of knew what I liked, but the reason, and I just would have gone to California for the lifestyle change. Yeah. But I don't know. I know that I ended up going to a school in Chicago called DePaul, which is like a pretty dope private liberal arts school. And it's in a really great part of Chicago. So even though it was 2 hours away, it was definitely, a big change for me too. And it had a lot, like my town was like very white Caucasian that I grew up in. And this was like a very diverse city school. Yeah. So it ended up being like a pretty big change.
So what path were you following at that point when you were leaving college? What was your first job out of school? Did you immediately go into DJing, or were you DJing during college?
No, it was a few years afterwards. And I thought really what I wanted to do maybe was do like video production and editing, because it kind of combined the math and the art.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started interning at an agency that booked DJs, but I was more on the film and video end and photography end. And I think what was cool, they were very boutique, but there was a lot of I had interned at bigger places that were like bigger production companies. This one was a little bit like more scrappy, but I just got a lot of hands-on experience at a really young age. So I started like actually creating video projects, but then I slowly was like moved into sales because I'm great with clients. I think sometimes there needs to be an intermediate in between creatives.
Oh, totally.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the client, the owner of the agency was like, I think you should come and try and DJ with us. And I was a big no for a long time, but I have an ear. I know music. And so I ended up finally kind of giving in, as I would call it. To his credit, he was very good at pushing me into it. And then I did there's a very, very prestigious high school here, and I did their homecoming in their school gym with another DJ.
So fun. Oh
and it was, and it was like, oh, I know what songs to pick. I just didn't know how to blend them or mix them. So I ended up kind of enjoying myself, and that's really how the doors started opening for DJing. But it really wasn't probably anything I was going to do until like my late 20s.
That's
probably
so
15 years ago.
So did he ask you to give it a go because you had that ear? Like you would swap songs that you liked and kind of did you give feedback on other DJ sets, or why did he think that you would be a good DJ?
He's one of his really amazing talents is he's a visionary. So he can vision anyone into almost anything. Like he can see possibilities. So I don't even think he saw that he didn't even probably know my musical ear. He just knew I was like a hard worker. Like he would trust me. He would put a lot of people in a lot of positions and stuff. And so
I love that.
It's really one of his gifts. I mean, it's hard to say no to this man, because I did for a while, and then here I am DJing. But I think, and then I didn't really go for it for a minute. So I DJ'd this event. I was like, wow, this is fun. You can control the room. Like I kind of get it. And then I just said yes to a few opportunities to like assist other DJs. Then I took it even more seriously when I was like, if I'm going to do this, I want to really get good and learn how to mix. So at that time, so everything is digital now. Pretty much everything is digital, but I literally learned on CDs. You put a CD in on a thing, and it's very much like turntables. You can control the speed, but you still had to carry on CDs. And so then I switched to vinyl to learn vinyl, which is just a little more technical. And I asked DJs in Chicago, like, can I meet with you and can you teach me? And honestly, everyone was really cool. And I have mad respect for them helping me. And so I just slowly became, better and better. And then I found myself in, and then I would do an event. I was super hungry, but I was like, I would do anything for no money, little money. DJing live is like the best way to create new opportunities, because people will see me.
Right.
So I was just super aggressive with that piece of it, and it just started to roll. And also the agency at that time, they could give me business because they had private events that they could put me on too. Now it's a little bit more reverse. I drive all of my business. But at that time, I was just experimenting and learning and having no idea that I would turn into this.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you were doing it with CDs.
Yeah, CDs.
How do you even take the CD out fast enough or you would burn a CD? You would put the set on a CD and burn it and then play that CD, or how would you switch?
No,
songs?
basically like because you have two. So you
Okay.
play
Okay.
you go once from the other to the other to the other to the
Okay.
other. So that's how that
Oh,
works.
got it. I kind of miss CDs. They were so fun. Like we would always Sharpie on the CDs,
No, I miss the
write out the
CD
songs.
too.
It was such a good era.
When you can make like your best of CDs.
Yes. Oh my God. Best of summer, like
Yeah,
2002. I still have them. Like,
I
I don't
know.
have a CD player, but I have the CDs, hoping one day. Such a
I
throwback.
know. It would be so fun.
So, why were you a no for so long?
I just thought it was like not I was like it's late, it's weird. I don't want to be in front of people. I just
Mm,
really wasn't attracted to it at all. And some of those things are very real. Like there's a very unglamorous part of DJing as well
hmm.
that I could probably like read into like a little bit. And maybe I was just like afraid and fearful.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I totally get that. It is scary to be the one responsible. That's a lot of pressure to like
Dude, it's so
own the
much
energy
pressure.
of the room.
So I have this is like so later in my career, I'll sometimes carry a really important events, a lot of people, galas. I mean, weddings to me are make me nervous because it's their wedding.
Yeah.
Um, huge 1,000-person event, corporate event. So like I get really nervous and I feel a lot of pressure. And I really just sort of know it comes with pressure, but I've really had a breakthrough. So this is like really jumping into my mindset now of who I am. So because I used to like not that day, I couldn't really fully function because I'm just so nervous.
Mm-hmm.
But I really had this like whole like kind of spiritual awakening around it. I realized like I was trying to be God, if that makes sense. Like I was like, who am I to think I'm God in the situations of these events? Like if it felt like if I had to nail it 100%, could not get it wrong, had to be perfect for the event to be good. And if I was a little off, it wouldn't be as good as it could be. So and I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I putting that pressure on myself? And so I really so I changed my mindset and I do this like almost like ritual prayer in the beginning because I was like, there's already so much goodwill. There's already like godlike energy like in that room. And I just want to be a fucking vessel to like play with it and manipulate it and do the best I can. And so I really asked to be used in service of something amazing, but I don't have to be amazing, if that makes sense. And it really has shifted me to just take some pressure off and I'm actually probably like play better in some ways because the perfectionist thing can fuck me up and make me like
Yeah.
not in the moment. And like, it's such a fine line between really wanting to perform well in service, but also trying to be perfect and my best. And so I've really played with that quite a bit and I've changed that because it's just a lot to carry. It's a lot of eyes on you. It's a lot of events. And at the end of the day, like I'm not God. I'm not responsible for some of these things. And I've also seen events where like there's been drama or like I work for corporate settings and there's been a lot of tension, maybe internally or maybe with their diversity. And like I used to sort of take that on and now I really don't. And I learned major life lessons through DJing around caring, but not like caring, but don't like carry everything, like major, yeah. So major things. It's really taught me like a lot about people in life.
Interesting. Care but don't carry. I love that. I haven't
Yes,
heard that before.
it's
That's
big.
huge. So you say this prayer before your events to be a vessel and to care and notice and pick up on that energy, but then not carry it yourself. So how would you, from a DJ perspective, adapt how you're going to perform, or maybe like what songs or what kind of tone you want to set if you're feeling something like tension in the room?
I mean, it's so basically like how I look at, music, it's all energy, right? And so like I really play into the energetics of event. And that's why if people are dancing or not dancing, like it doesn't matter. Like it's really about the vibe in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the things that I really, 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 really do for, especially for a corporate company is I like where it become tense is because not everybody that's there feels like the music represents them. So I
Mm.
really make sure that I play like the diversity of the room and make sure that everyone feels seen,
Mm-hmm.
which is a smart idea for me also because it wins people over for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So there's things like that I will do. There's an energetic way that I'll play with people, but I would say what gets in the way a lot of times is alcohol. And there, I can't, when people are drinking like that, sometimes where it gets a little irresponsible, ugly. And with that shit, I can't, there's nothing I can do to like change that. So sometimes I've been in some situations where it's been uncomfortable or it's been like a little bit disastrous. I mean, not a lot. I'm talking like bad situations. And in that case, I just really try to take care of myself.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So obviously you're very in tune with your own emotions and your own energy and then the emotions and energy of the room. I want to talk a little bit about your master's. You studied social and emotional intelligence, which is so interesting. I didn't even know that there was a program out there. And I want to hear a little bit about what you learned and how that helped you in your DJing and then just like evolving in the rest of your life beyond DJing and how it kind of opened your mind up.
Yeah, no, that's a great, and actually the story starts a little bit sooner. Like basically in my 20s, when I was growing my career, the company that I work for created like videos for a personal growth and development company in Chicago. And so that's how I got introduced. And I did a women's weekend when I was out of college. My boyfriend had broke up with me, and it really changed my life in that weekend. I just saw how much I didn't know, and I saw how much I got feedback about that I had a lack of self-worth, that I didn't know who I was, and I felt like really seen for the first time, which just led me to getting a life coach when I'm in my 20s. It led me to do some personal growth development programs. So the same place where I got my master's, I had no idea I was going to get my master's. I don't even think they had launched it yet, but they had these tools and these trainings for personal development that were really amazing, kind of out there. And now it's very popular. Everyone's doing personal development. I mean, my friends thought I was like joining a cult in my 20s. It was strange to do that. And I poured my money into it. But I found that like, it was so beneficial. It was so meaningful to me. And it gave me so much more my awareness. And I give it a lot of credit to not feeling like I have to follow this idea of this sort of life plan that everyone else seems to have. It gave me mad permission to know who I was. And the first thing you have to realize is I actually don't know who I am. And then I was on a quest to really find myself. So it was like very intelligence. And it was a lot of very spiritual. I went on these spiritual pilgrimages with people. I was very young in the program compared to everyone else. And then there was some very intensive laboratory programs. I just did it all. I just kept doing the next thing. And so that really grew me as a leader. That grew me as a businesswoman. That grew me as a DJ. That grew me in my relationships. And it gave me just like a lot of understanding of who I was. And then when they launched a master's, so then I basically did all the program when I was in my early 30s. So I started to lead programs. And then they also launched a master's program. And so since I had already touched it so much, I just went for the master's. And the master's really gave me an understanding of where all the philosophies and where all of the curriculum is built from an existential perspective, from philosophy, neuroscience, Adlerian. And so the program was so hard for me. There was an application. So you have to write like an essay every week on how you're changing your life and your world. And then you had to write an essay on the stuff you're reading. And the reading's just really, I'm really good in the world. I'm like, yo, let's go. I'm going to like apply this. But when it came to reading, I just had a lot of trouble. I mean, I was also DJing. I was in a relationship. It was a lot going on at that time. So I did this master's and it was super hard. And I wrote this final essay about how one becomes like their own true self. Like, how do we know we're not fully influenced by everything else, and how is it authentically ours, which is, I feel like, is like my life's work. So that was all part of my journey. And I think as a DJ, it gave me words to talk about things that I already intuitively knew. It gave me a lot of permission to be a leader in the space. So that unicorn I talk about, coming out of my hometown, it's like, I'm definitely a bit of a unicorn in the DJ space and the path that I've carved as well. And so there was just, when you talk about service and you talk when the I did it helped me understand what mattered to me and then started expressing it.
Wow. To learn that whole self-worth piece, I'm sure opened your eyes to recognizing that not only is there no one life path, but you're needed on your true individual path. And I'm sure that you started to see the potential of that path. What kind of modalities were you experiencing or experimenting with or learning through this program that kind of opened your eyes? Were you meditating, like visualizing a future self, or you mentioned a laboratory?
It was that we did a lot of different things.
Okay.
A lot of it is, so it's a lot of it's emotional. So it's a very emotional based curriculum. So like
Okay.
the naming your feelings and being in touch with your feelings was a very big core of it. So the benefit of that is that I had such a mask of, I mean, either I'm happy or I'm not happy, but I'm not going to express it. So it gave me permission to understand that sadness, anger, joy, fear are going to pulsate through my body all of the time. And there's such a freedom that comes with that. And there's such power that comes with that. There's a big piece on where you actually go and you redo your, like, everyone knows about inner child work, but in this program, in the depths of it, you would actually go and you would redo your 2-year-old, you'd redo your 6-year-old. And it gave me, it just, there's basically, you kind of, in my opinion, like split from those pieces of you. So it makes you more whole as a person when you have radical permission to go be a 4-year-old again and ask for the things that you didn't know how to ask for in a very profound way. And there was a lot on personal power where I learned not to be the nice girl. Like I didn't have to just be nice, and really exercising things that were over the top to know you're still safe in your full rage and anger. And there was a lot on visioning, and there's a lot on purposeful living, a lot on understanding and kind of clearing your family karma and understanding what might limit you there. It's a very, very comprehensive program too.
Wow. I'm sure
I know.
all of those had an incredibly profound impact on you. Was there one that stood out that just was aha after aha that just really hit home for you? Or any that didn't? Like, were there any chapters where you're like, this isn't really landing?
Yeah, I'm sure there was some of those too. I think the ones that like really got me out of my comfort zone around like saying there's like going against the grain, saying no. Like it really got me out of the good girl model, which challenged me because it's sort of how I knew to be safe, to be like well liked, agreeable, and so things like that where you really start. And I think if I did the program in today's world, it would be very different. At that time, there's similarities. But I almost feel like healing's faster now. Like you don't have to go through all of that to get it, in my opinion. I've really kind of rethought this whole thing. But at that time, a lot of those things were really beneficial.
Interesting. And how did you show up in your life at this time when you're going through this really transformative program with a lot of people who are aligning with you and wanting to develop, wanting to grow, wanting to discover more about themselves? And then how are you interacting like in the real world, like with your college friends, if you were going out in the city at all while you're DJing these sets? And like sometimes I haven't done shadow work probably even remotely close to the extent that you have, but sometimes it's hard to interact with the world when you hide away in a cave for a little bit and peel away the layers of yourself and then like reemerge. I guess, how did you balance this really intense and immersive program, it sounds like, with your day-to-day life?
Yeah, it was messy.
Yeah.
Like it was messy. Like it was like, I didn't know how to create context, I think, for my friends and family. All of a sudden I'm like now have opinions and bringing up things that they had no idea about. And they also, I also was trying to like be this like person doing personal growth. Then I was trying to also be the party girl, and it just didn't resonate. So it took me a long time. Like I still would try to fit that old mold with like those boyfriends and going out and drinking, but like it's really hard, in my opinion, to do like growth work and be so conscious, but then have a weekend where you're unconscious. Like it just didn't fit. But it took me a long time to really like sort that out. And I remember I had friends who like were like, we don't want to be friends with you. Like they felt very threatened by it. They felt like I was confiding in other people and not them.
Mm.
So people definitely had opinions about it. I think because I was willing to do stuff that they weren't, and I was willing to talk about stuff they weren't willing to talk about, like,
Mhm.
so a lot of it stirred up them, and I was changing the dynamics of things too. So it felt rough in it. In hindsight now, it's like, oh my God, everything was really working out for me
Mhm.
because I found other new friends who are like, now my friends are in so much alignment. That I surround myself with have all done a lot of personal work and development, are all what I call light workers in their own way, are very out about who they are. And I have like really, really nourishing community and friendships because of that. It just took me a while to get there.
Yeah. And some of that process, at least in my own experience, is kind of going over the line of being like maybe a little over boundaried or saying like no, maybe a few too many times,
Mhm.
and taking it a little too far to get out of that people pleaser, good girl space. And yeah, that can ruffle feathers, but it shows you who's willing to grow with you and who's willing to like learn this new piece of you and understand why you're doing that, and wants to meet you in your new evolved state. So it's kind of a beautiful way to see who really is going to show up for you when you're showing up for yourself, and then cling on to those people, maybe rework the other relationships, or or you just evolve and grow out of them, and that's okay too. But it is a very interesting kind of scary process at times.
Mm.
And how did you balance not getting too stuck in that? Like especially being a part of this program where it's a full-blown hobby of yours probably, and you're studying it deeply, and you were dedicated to it for years and years and years in a very structured way. Like how did you not get like lost in the darkness of that inner child healing and all the shadow work that you were doing? How did you find levity and lightheartedness at the same time, or did you take breaks? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And like how I look at it now is I feel like we have seasons, right?
Mm.
We go through seasons of growth. And so I think there's something amazing about fully giving yourself over to the hard, like, parts of growth. And you also like, it can be very like seductive, and like you can stay there for a little bit too long. And
Mm.
so I think knowing that there are seasons, but when I was doing this stuff, it's like, so I was pretty dedicated to this program. But this program also is like, the biggest thing about it is it doesn't allow you to stay in like victim consciousness. It's a lot of responsibility. So
Mhm.
it keeps it moving. It's very dynamic. So you're always on to the next assignment or growth or thing. So in that sense, but it was still a lot of time and a lot of money. I will never probably ever do anything that in depth again in my life. It just was an opportunity. It was available. And like I was saying now, what I've learned is that you can labor through healing and you can labor through growth. But I also think we're in a new energy and a new time in our bodies, in our atmosphere and the energies where we can also do things faster. And I just believe that from my own knowingness. So that's the download that I've been getting to. But I would say recently, because after I did that program, I've chilled out quite a bit on things when everything was complete. But I always have a coach. I just like to have, because I like to talk things out and I like to learn that way. So I did a big chunk of healing right around in 2020, like something. My whole life with COVID changed because I couldn't DJ. So I lost all these events. And I ended up doing some plant medicine that stirred up a lot of stuff that I really had hidden in my subconscious. And so I went through this whole period, like 2 years ago, of having to really deal with some hard things.
Mhm.
And in that, I learned a profound lesson, and because I was like, it was a lot, and I was like, I'm going to heal this. So I like was focused on healing this. And I realized in that moment, because I had swung so far the other way at trying to heal it, I was like, dude, I could be healing for the rest of my life, or I can just be like, I'm good. And so I really was like, I just kind of decided that like, I feel good now. And I did. And so not that things don't get triggered or come up, and I have such that taught me so much self-love and so much of understanding my own, that worthiness thing I talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that you can do the shadow work, and I think it's really important too. But when your identity gets stuck in it, it can be a little bit dangerous. And also spiritual bypassing is very real too, and jumping over it. But I think also, and this is just like a bridge, I think that in a lot of ways, and I've been in this spiritual world for a minute. I've done plant medicines, read a lot of books, listened to a lot of podcasts, like traveled, know a lot of people. And it's interesting. And I don't blame anybody in particular, but I almost feel like the spiritual wellness community is a little bit co-opt right now. It's a moneymaker. And I think there's a lot of people irresponsibly channeling, or irresponsibly creating programs, or irresponsibly becoming coaches and teachers. And I feel like it's a little bit dangerous. And so I actually have a lot of opinions about that now. And so I've almost like kind of like removed myself in some ways, and have way different opinions, where I was like all in before around things too, which I think just goes with evolution.
Definitely.
As well.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably go down a whole rabbit hole of the things that we've seen of programs that maybe keep you in it the way yours didn't, the way yours kept you moving forward and moving on to the next chapter. There's a lot that kind of keep you going deeper and darker maybe, and not quite finding the light and the solution at the end of the tunnel. But having been very conscious of this healing space for so long, what else have you noticed change in a positive way?
One of my biggest things that comes to mind is understanding what it is to have what the feminine is. So, in men and in women, we all have feminine and masculine. And so what's crazy to me, so the DJ world, it is very male dominated, but in my opinion, DJing is so feminine based because it uses intuition, it's energy reading, it uses the feminine skills in us in such a large way. No, men have that as well, but I just think that's why I love female DJs, because there's such a dance between that person in the room. And so understanding my feminine gifts and my almost hostility to my own masculine, how that affects people who I date and people that I am. But understanding the power of the feminine and the divine feminine has been such a game changer, because I think it's really been oppressed, repressed, and it's out of balance now in the world. And so the more that I have understood, and I went to I did a pretty profound trip to Egypt with Joey almost a year ago, where a lot of those sort of spiritual pilgrimages have brought a lot of things online, codes, as I like to call them, and wisdom of things that are very innate to women that have just been really suppressed. And the latest work that I've been doing is understanding that I used to think everything was me, like if I had a bad feeling, I was like, oh, it's something's going on with me. And then I've really started to understand oh wow, we're all vibrations. So I pick up a lot on what's other people's stuff, and I pick up a lot on what's going on in the room, and it's such a gift. But it's not all me. I used to think I was too responsible. So now knowing that, and a person understanding that we're all just we're little receptors is incredibly helpful, because you can protect yourself better. You can notice it, you can change that, and you don't have to personalize it so much too. And so a lot of that has been understanding the way that my past lives, understanding the way that my DNA and my ancestors affect who I am today has been a recent journey. And so I'm kind of on a bit of a quest to can I get my DNA back to my original blueprint, so I'm not influenced by those things and complete things. And the way that I've really found lately this last year, shout out to Lauren, who's really taught me a lot of that this year. She's someone I've worked with, is through the body. And so that has been a big, important piece that I think people are moving into, because so much of our experience is that we leave the body in very unconsciously. And coming into this body, claiming a body, which then leads to like really feeling really well in things that we eat, how we take care of our body, starting to feel body has been a huge game changer for me. And
Wow.
because I could see the way it's so easy for me to like leave, and because it's kind of like how I DJ. When I DJ, I can see the energy of music and I don't even have to like really like look at the room. I can just sort of see it out of my third eye. I like know what to play next. But all of that is great, but like, no, dude, like you chose to come here on earth, like you got to be embodied. And then it just really a new way of life has like started to course through me.
That is so incredible. Wow, I love that. Do you do tapping or anything to get you back into your body if you feel like you've left it at all?
That's a great question. I think tapping's really great too. So breathing is like life, you know, and then also like I'll do breath work. Like I'll go to a class. I kind of need like I like to just pay people to tell me what to do because I'm accountable. Like it's really like necessary too. I also like sometimes just ask my body. So this kind of goes back something we either talked about on the call or off the call about like I started asking my body what it wants, and my body wants something very different than what I want sometimes. And so I was like, oh shit. So I experienced a little bit of burnout in the beginning of this year. I was traveling so much, and I was like in 4 different cities in airports DJing, and then I was flying to LA to DJ an event, and
Oh my gosh.
I broke down crying in the Uber, and I was like, I called my friend. I was like, I don't want to go. And I was like, I just don't want to go. And this made no sense because this was like a really great client, 5-star hotel off the cliffs of California. Like it was a dope event. But what I now looking back, I was burnt out. And so my body was so tired. I have been so used to overriding my body because I can just turn it on, go, 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 go. But now that I was doing all this work on my body was getting louder. And so I realized like I have to rethink how I run my life and how I do my life because I can't just push myself anymore. It's not sustainable. It's not like really the way I want to live. So I learned a pretty profound lesson on that. And I wrote this post the other day that you were talking about is like, because I realized I was still good. I could do it, but I was at like 70%. I was like at 80%. And I realized the cost of my life when I'm not at 100%, especially there's a cost to my clients, but there's a cost to me. And I was like, what would it look like if I really wanted to maintain 100% in the areas that I show up for? And so when I went back on that, the formula was like, I've got to say no to way more stuff from jobs. And then also in my social life, I have to be like way more discerning, and which just led me to realizing what's important to me and what's not important to me, having this conversation with my body. And then there's just like, I wasn't very good at being bored, and being bored is like a superpower. Like it's good to be bored, and I was deeply uncomfortable with it. And so like the times off isn't just like kind of time off. It has to be like deep rest. And what does that really look for? And what does that really like nourishment look like? So when you start prioritizing the body and you start sleeping more, you know, my life just started to take on like a little bit of a different beat.
How have you noticed that show up? I've struggled with boredom too, and it's such an interesting thing reframing that from I'm wasting time to this is my space to rejuvenate, and then from that comes so much. Like there's so much creativity that comes out of boredom and that deep rest that you're talking about. So have you noticed that show up in like your DJing or just in feeling better, and so operating at a higher level, or in coming up with new ideas? Like where have you seen the biggest changes from that?
I love that you said creativity because my creativity like can get turned on when I'm bored, when I'm in that space. And I went to Baja and I did this cleanse in July, and it is a lot of slowness. And I can't tell you how many downloads I got for like new projects, new ideas. I was like streaming, like, and it was such a good example of when I give time for that, what can come through. Yeah. And I think again, there's seasons for that. I really spend my winters a little bit more down. I think our feminine codes are deeply interwoven with that as well. Like, you know, really enjoying my bath and enjoying myself and being and having pleasure in areas are deeply kind of against the matrix of what we're taught. And that's the other thing I think about, is that being bored, when I would look at that underneath, it's feeling like I'm not enough, feeling I'm not doing enough. I'm like, okay, but where does that come from? And in my opinion, that is a belief, and that is like a frequency that I'm plugged into that's deeply like engulfed in this hustle culture. And so do I actually think I'm bored, or am I just trained to believe that I shouldn't be bored? And so that's when you really start to like realize like, dude, rest is liberation. You know, and being quiet is liberation, because in a lot of ways I think there's a side of the world that doesn't inside of me that doesn't want me to be, you know, restful, because it starts to change the decisions I make, the money I spend, you know. So like it's really complex when you really, it's way more than just like deciding to stay in at night. Like there's a deep liberation, I think, for women, especially when we really take care of ourselves. And also, honestly, I mean, I'm not blind, but like also a lot of this is through the lens of privilege. I can make enough money to say no to other things, you know? So like, I'm also blessed to have that opportunity to kind of create that for myself. Just with being an entrepreneur, so I'm kind of in a state of creating new opportunities of revenue for myself all of the time. And so somebody who chooses that path, I think that's one of the hardest things, is there's no guaranteed salary. I mean, there's no guarantees anyways, but especially as a DJ, it's not like I have repetitive projects. I'm constantly new client. It's like a lot of sales. So it's a really weird place to live and work in, because you have no guarantee for money in. So you're kind of living in trust the whole time, and you're kind of living in this surrendering. And also I have built systems to be strategic about it, and I kind of know how my seasons work, and I've been in the game for a minute too. But I think that's really hard, is just living without knowing where all your money is coming. It's a hard thing to balance, especially I'm not selling packages, you know, I'm not selling like a 6-month contract. So that's a hard thing to do with what I do.
Yeah. And especially in incorporating deep rest and that divine feminine with, maybe, I'm sure, this kind of insecurity of where the next gig is coming from. Like, you probably were thinking at times, I could be using these moments that I know I need deep rest to be booking new clients, to be expanding my business in some way. How have you incorporated femininity into this male dominated industry of DJing? And how have you approached building a business and earning income and building structure around your business while incorporating that femininity? How have you infused that into your actual work? Because I think that's a huge struggle for me, wanting to be deeply feminine and show up in that way and take care of ourselves and be deep in pleasure and rest and rejuvenation and creativity, but also having to support yourself and build a business that you can count on within a male dominated industry of DJing.
These are all such good questions. And honestly, like, I'm still the student,
Yeah.
you know, I'm still learning very much too. But I think one of the things, like, I laugh about that. But one of the things that, like, I think that is super helpful is how I kind of think about it is, how can I use my masculine in support of allowing myself to be deeply feminine and creative? So I am very, very, I'm very, very on my numbers. I'm on my projections of what I'm going to make. And so my number game is tight. And
Math
so that's
major.
how I look. Yeah, exactly. And it just gives me the security to play within, right? So I don't, as much control as I can have, or as much prediction I can have, as what I do. And that allows me then to say no to things, because, and this is something I have struggled with. I have a coach, and she's like, because I'll be like, well, I could make this much money tonight. Like, why wouldn't I take it? And so it's really been really, really challenging to say no to money and be in abundance, because it almost feels like there could never be enough. So like I'm still working on like really like changing that mindset, because it's unknown. Like I can't say no to this client. And so I'm working through issues with that. And then the other thing is like with a woman and my worth, that really tied to my rate. And so I've increased my rate really consistently. I'm definitely someone that charges from a private event space. I'm on the very high end. So then you send your rate out and you have people, wow, I didn't know you were that much. And so I'm constantly being challenged with the world's feedback on their thoughts on my own worth. And so it's really been a beautiful exercise, because you get to like, and I feel really good about my rates. I'm probably going to raise them again, because it's like, when I compare myself, I feel like it could be too much. But when I think about what I give and how much my life force is given to your event, it's like, dude, like, no, let's go. Like, pay me more so I can give you more. And so I just basically want the energy exchange to feel super good. And I think that I have learned that I have to be really okay and entitled and own and really okay with receiving a lot at the same time too. So like all of these things are kind of masculine and feminine in support of each other. And these are things that I've like worked on and I've rebuilded and stuff too.
And you also mentioned offline that you don't actually drink. And so I think that that's something that's probably unique in this space too. How do you physically take care of yourself when you're performing gigs and you're staying up late and you're in these environments that, you know, have alcohol or just a lot of stimulation around you? How have you taken care of yourself physically?
I know, it's so interesting. And I've struggled with it, especially when I became sober. I quit drinking like during COVID, and I had gotten a lot of messages like not to drink, and I'd gone through stints of it, but I really gave it up. And it was like, dude, my life, a lot of magic started happening in my life. And I wasn't even drinking that much, but when I gave it up, my life took off in a very creative way. And I was like, I'm just gonna roll with this as a superpower. And so it really changed my whole thought around alcohol. I also feel like as I got older, I'll have a drink, but I feel hungover the next day, and I can't afford, in my opinion, to feel like a little off. Like I just like to feel good. So a lot of that is the reason why I stopped drinking. Also, like from a spiritual perspective, a lot of gifts started opening up when I stopped drinking. And that's like, we could do another podcast on that. But my wanting to feel good every day is so important to me. And I'm staying like very, very hydrated, having minerals, having sleep, working out, feeling good in my body, mobility. I'm always like kind of learning more and doing some biohacking, massages, cold plunges, like you name it. Like
love cold plunges.
You do? Oh yeah.
I'm obsessed.
I know. I wish I could do them every day. Like those things really make a big difference, right? And so when you're performing and you're on, I just can't fuck around basically. So I got to feel really good, and it makes such a difference, you know.
Yeah.
It makes such a difference in everything.
Yeah. It's hard when you do reach that level. Like let's say you're on a retreat or something, or you do a cleanse and you access that piece of yourself that's like really optimal, and you notice how good you can feel. It's hard to then do anything different. Like you become so much more sensitive to then feeling bad.
Yes,
that
exactly.
You're like, I actually can't afford to operate that way, because I notice how lethargic I am. I notice how foggy my brain feels. I notice that I'm totally cut off from my emotions or from my intuition. Like it's not even that feels bad, but you start to notice what you're giving up. You're giving up too much by not just taking care of yourself. Everything opens up in your brain. It's like a door opens, a window opens, and everything's different. And all of a sudden you can access something so far beyond yourself. And it's just not worth it to do anything outside of that. So lately I'm thinking a lot about caffeine and how it triggers this, like just a really minor feeling of anxiety in me, but I love coffee. I'm drinking coffee right now. I'm debating if it's worth it or not. So
no, I did a no coffee stint, and it was Oh my God, my anxiety was down. It's so true. But like, you know, my thing is the sugar, like it's,
Yeah.
I fucking love sweet. And
Me too.
so,
I didn't even mention that I have an issue with sugar because I don't want to give it up. I am not there yet.
right. See,
I'm like
when
caffeine,
you're like,
maybe, not sugar.
yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
know when you're gripping it too, but
Yeah.
like, then you gotta live, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Being moderation, whatever. I don't even know if that's the word I would use or whatever
Hmm.
too, but I would just say like, I've changed my ways because I've wanted to and not out of diet or out of scarcity or have
Right.
to or whatever. That's when the shit works and sticks. There's just so many dope modalities that are
Hmm.
fun. Like I've been taking these classes on sound healing and understanding how sound healing affects the water in our fascia and which affects electricity in our body. Dude, like
Whoa.
there's a lot going on that we're not talking about. And I like know it's going to be a really fun 20 years to be alive in the
Hmm.
next years is all I could say.
Especially as a DJ, because I know that you infuse your events with Reiki. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but you incorporate so much more than just your own energy and the music that you're playing.
People be like that your energy is so amazing. Even in I create a ton of playlists and you can have them all on for the channel and it's like people are like I can fill you in playlists. And I was like, okay, great. Then I was like, why does everyone say that? And how could that be true? And it's like when I started to understand, I worked with this Irish shaman and she's like, you can infuse the music with your codes, like with your energy and information. I'm like, okay, yeah. But then when I started doing it, I started thinking about it from a quantum perspective.
Mhm.
I was like, okay, this makes sense. And this applies not to me. It's we walk around as a vessel of influence and frequency. And so I do it in music, but like you get to do it when you walk down the street. You could do it with a client. You get to do it when you're with your family. Like we are all really vibration, and the more that we know that and own that, we see how much we affect each other.
So, as you've learned more about yourself, your business has evolved from having an agency book your gigs in DJing to then attracting clients to having a steady stream of gigs. You've evolved even beyond DJing to consulting services, brand consulting services. I saw that you even helped with the strategy of a book launch. Like, how have you built this kind of common message or thread through all these very different forms of business and income streams, and how have you opened up those channels along the way?
I mean, I think part of it is like I'm just sort of made like as if I ever get a reading, like I'm sort of like just made to do like 7 things. Like that's just what I like. I don't like to have one thing. So some people are very different. And so like I just sort of naturally like want to evolve and I like new things. And so that's part of it too. But a lot of it was just because I DJ, but I've learned a lot about business. So
Mm-hmm.
I just got a whole, you know, almost MBA just from like living and working and realizing and just have other skills about knowing what's going to be trending and understanding how they work. And a big catalyst though was when COVID happened and I couldn't DJ for like almost a full year. Every event I had canceled. It gave me
Wow.
an opportunity for like growth in many ways. But one of the things that came out of that was I was like, I just got to pivot. And I tried to pivot and get this big corporate job that was gonna be fucking epic, and that fell through. And then I was just sort of like desperate, and I started just to. It led me to like asking things. So I asked my friend, I was like, "Why don't you're gonna launch your book and hire me, and I'm gonna launch it for you. I'm gonna figure out the strategy." She's like, "Great." So then we started teaming up and doing business together. So I launched her book, and honestly, I learned so much about the book world, and like just like anything, sometimes not knowing anything is your biggest advantage because you just come in with a clear set of eyes and ask a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so we launched her book, and then that led us to launching other books, and then we did retreats together, and then that led me to other opportunities with business. So that pause of not making money also just forced me to like figure some other things out too, which gave me really the confidence to like launch a new brand that encompasses everything. And also how I see my life progressing in my 40s, like I think that I will just introduce other things and grow in other ways too.
Mm-hmm. And do you intentionally and proactively market yourself in these different areas, or is it more of a conversation based kind of a grassroots growth that you find yourself with new opportunities and allow them to come to you more so than seeking out gigs in these other spaces with other people?
It's bad. I think the best thing is that I've had to learn to ask for things, and I've had to learn how to like tell people what I'm looking for, because people find me very bright and they want to help. I have so many good people who are like, I want to support you, but unless I really tell them how, it doesn't happen as well. So I've really had to sort of define that and like kind of grow and create that and let people know I'm interested. Because and which I'm not always which I wasn't super good at, but that's just been, I think, a big piece of my growth is really initiating it.
How have you evolved your definition of success over your career thus far?
That's a really good question. I think my success was very like much like cookie cutter to like what society teaches us, which is not a bad thing by any means. It was just like the checking the boxes lifestyle that I still like was thinking of. And I also just think it's like a very different era, but it's like, for me, one of the biggest things about that is like freedom and time. And so the fact that I like can really, I feel very free to do what I want means everything to me. And it has like a shadow side too. Like I can be like too free and I don't want to really like, really commit to anything too. But for the most part, my freedom and my ability to have the time I want, because I feel like time is our biggest currency, is for me what makes me feel so, so, so happy, and getting my basic needs met and like living a comfortable life has been a big piece of it too. But I don't think that I just heard a quote about what happiness is or what success is, but it's not necessarily happiness. And I think that that's a big thing that I've had to like make sure that there's discomfort involved, stretching and growing. So I think that that's a little bit of how I define it, is like just the freedom that I have, that I'm also like, there's some growth edges that I'm hitting, but the rest of it is like a big choice to like decide that I'm good and it's good, because it's hard. And then again, I think is also like rebellion and liberation. I don't need more. I don't have to be more. I think that really truly claiming that I'm good now is a very, very powerful thing to do when we're living in the world and the whole world there's a lot of pointers about how we need more change, more beautiful, look younger, look skinnier. Like there's a lot of messaging that we should change. Right. So.
Yeah. And it's so tempting. It's easy to fall into that trap and go down the spiral. And you get to decide when and what that looks like. And I have tricked myself into thinking that fulfillment means feeling happy all the time. But like you said earlier in our conversation, there's always going to be anger, sadness, joy, excitement, fear running through our blood at the exact same time. And there's no state or time period in your life where you're not going to feel those other things. A lot of times that feeling of fulfillment includes that feeling of fear. Like you get so much fulfillment out of feeling fear and doing something anyways. Feeling that anger and resolving a conflict with yourself or with somebody else. Like a lot of fulfillment in just the full spectrum of humanness. And so often I forget that and trick myself that, well, maybe I'm not there yet because I'm not happy all the time. It's always good to remind yourself of that you get to make the choice that you're good.
Yeah. And I just think like when I just think about the messaging, and I'm not a big like us versus them, like someone's doing something to me, but there is a lot, you just have to acknowledge like, dude, like we're not the way that our lives and the humanity has sort of like evolved is like very tricky because we have so much available. I'm so blessed. I can do so many things, see the world, but there's also this sense of like more and, and I'm kind of a big abstract thinker too. So like, that's what really kind of changes me. It's like, oh, like if I'm in this machine, like who am I going to choose to be like in it and stuff? And so there's a lot of personal power, in that as well too. I mean, and believe me, it's a journey, right? Like I'm like, how much Botox, how much filler, like I don't think you ever arrive. Maybe you do. I'll let you know.
Yeah, let me know. I have one more question for you. Given that you've experimented with kind of like all the different healing modalities and like looked at it from so many different directions, what is a resource that really sticks with you that was transformative?
The thing that comes to mind is actually like, it's the coaches I've had. It's so like it's the biggest investment, you know, that I think I've made is the one-on-one support. And for me though, it's the best time and it's the best investment I've made. So I have always been very stretched. I feel like whenever I've hired someone, because I hire someone that will help, you know, hold me accountable, that like pushes me, makes me get uncomfortable, like really good people. And with that investment I've made in myself for that one-on-one time, it just makes me like be able to like timeline jump, you know. It's for me, that's what really, really works for me. And I think I see a lot of people reading and listening to podcasts and not integrating, and the integration is where it's at. And so the way I do it is when I'm working with one person, it's like you force integration, you force the time, you pay for it. So I would say that the coaching, and I've had many different coaches throughout my life, is definitely the best investment I've ever made.
Yeah. I think over these last couple of years, I've learned that building out a team for yourself is everything.
Yeah.
I always thought, I can do it myself. I can read it, or I can just like consume enough of this free content or whatever it is and figure it out myself. But if you really, like you said, want to integrate it, and you can integrate faster when you have someone holding you accountable.
Yeah. And I love how you hold that as like a team, because it's that relational thing is like, they're there to support me. It's just like, I did so much on my own too, like, and felt embarrassed or ashamed or didn't feel entitled enough to ask for things for a long time, you know, like I could be way better about that now. And I would see other people and I'd be like, you can do that. You know, it was threatening to me. And like, so I think that's such a good skill to have. And like, I love that perspective you have.
Yeah. If you're thinking of yourself at that time when you started DJing, so you stopped saying no and you're kind of stepping into that version of self, what advice would you give to someone who maybe kind of landed on something that feels right for them now? Like they've opened their mind a little bit and they're like, oh, this is kind of aligned, but I don't totally see how this is going to work out for me in the long run. Like, this is really scary, and I might be stepping away from a false sense of security.
It's such a good question. I think like you really have to like honor that intuitive hit that you have to say yes. Like, it's not an accident. And I think we undervalue that curiosity and we undervalue that intuition. Like, and then that is like our birthright of like internal self-trust, that it's no accident, right? So like, I think we really have to get better at being like, wow, this is a message from me. Like, so really honoring that too. And then I think you should do things like that. Like, it takes time to really understand and know if this is something you want to keep pushing. So like, there's a curiosity phase that I feel like has always been the thing that has led me to my next thing without needing to know if it's right, how long will I do this without a specific plan. So like, you have to have some grace period around that. And then I also think if you're going to do this to make money, you need to be real strategic. And so like, don't end the other thing till you really know that this thing can cover their bases that you need to understand and look up other people who are doing it and see what the projection is. So like, I mean, I live in a lot of like this spiritual feminine, like heal the body, but like also like I'm a ninja when it comes to like making sure that like my shit's taken care of, that like my bank statements are correct, that I have accountants, like, you know, and I sometimes undervalue that because it's not the world I want to live in. But at the same time, being smart and strategic about everything and really understanding like what it can look like is, if you want to take it to that next level, I think just be like, take care of yourself in that as well too.
Such good advice. Well, thank you so much, Megan. This has been really, really already useful to me. So I really appreciate it. I know your vulnerability is going to go a long ways with anyone who listens. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, you're the best. You really asked an amazing question. So thank you. It was like a journey down my life. Yeah, I appreciate it very much.
A trip, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much. Until next time, we have to talk again. There's so much more.
Part 2.
Thanks. Bye. Hi. Wow. Thank you so much for listening. If you got this far, you're a real one. So maybe you could do me a quick favor. If you're on Apple Podcasts, look at your screen, click where it says The Fruition Podcast in purple, and then in the top right-hand corner, there's a little button. It has a plus sign, and then it says follow. If you could just click that, it would mean the world to me, truly. And it would promote the show to other people who might really resonate with these conversations. So thank you and Godspeed.